Hello. Well, they're at it again. I assume you can see what I see, which is that we have moved on to a much more loosely defined version of what counts as defending property rights. So the DA, as usual, has backtracked. Now they've moved on to this thing. Instead of defending property rights in the absolute, they say, look, expropriation's fine, but as long as it's just and equitable. Now, just and equitable, the problem with that definition is you're going to be relying on the Constitutional Court to tell you what is just and equitable. The problem is there is, oh, for fuck's sake, my audio again. I really despise how everything sucks.
Okay, hold on. Let's try the settings again. And now we've got super chat sound, but we will find out now what the issue is. Right. I sound like I'm underwater. No, I agree. I agree. This is awful. So, yeah. No, I'm having a big problem because for some reason, now that my office has been cleaned, my microphone cable is has internal damage. Let's try it again. Can we hear each other now? Hello. Well, it seems to be recording the audio, but yeah, we'll find out now soon enough. Okay. Good grief. There's always something. There's always something. So no, the last week or so, the DA has been sort of switching to this perspective where like expropriation is fine as long as it's just and equitable. You've had Dean McPherson saying, you know, actually there's nothing wrong with the Expropriation Act. It's really good and it'll benefit the economy. Okay, so this is the DA, and they haven't admonished him. They haven't removed him from his post for siding with the ANC on their most radical position on land expropriation yet. Man, I should have drunk that tea sooner on tepid. The problem now is everyone's sort of thinking to themselves, well, where do we go now? What do we do? Now, some people will look at the DA and think, okay, well, yeah, but there's still, you know, the best thing on offer. I sort of don't think that's true. I still think people have a better option in the Vryheidsfront Plus, although I have my criticisms of them as well, because they have had ample opportunity to take a much more based position on pretty much everything. And they've been instead worried about being called racist. And I think this is very, very stupid. I don't think, of course, that they should go and become lunatics and start insulting people, but I think that they should stop worrying about whether taking reasonable political positions is going to land them in hot water. I mean, you know? So, we have a bit of a problem. The DA, some people who watch me and follow me will generally think, okay, so the DA are, well, they're kind of a bit rubbish, okay? Everyone agrees that the DA are kind of not great, but they're not that bad. even a lot of my followers will defend them as the least worst option. And in some cases, especially with local elections coming up, they are. And unfortunately, that's where we are. But to understand where they are right now, you have to go back just a few little years. Now, Helen Zille was always a big force in the party, you know, but she really only took over the party in about 2019-ish. So in 2014, when we had Musi Maimane in charge, or rather representing, let's be careful about it, the person in charge was a guy called James Self, and he had a little coterie of followers around him. A faction whose idea was that in order to grow, because the party had already saturated the minority vote, they had to go and capture black voters. And in order to capture black voters, they need black representation and they need more black-friendly policies. So they started praising the, Winnie Mandela, started calling out white privilege, started, all of the stuff that we now regard as kind of quite woke. And the issue with this was that it actually didn't work. Black people didn't come to the DA. They kind of saw the move for what it was, or rather they saw it for what it appeared to be, because I think they actually were genuine about this. I think they were genuine about this. This faction that was in control at the time, really sincere about actually not liking white people, believing in white privilege, believing in all of this sort of work stuff that they were pushing. And I think it's a case of white liberals in South Africa. A lot of them believe that, if only they were given the right chance at the right moment, they would have been part of the struggle. And this is like a little mental fantasy. I mean, no one's going to admit this aloud because it's a childish fantasy. It's kind of like, I'm sure some of you have read Spud. You remember that the novel about the little boy in the Michael House boarding school who fantasizes in the 1980s about joining the struggle, and then by the time he's graduated, apartheid is over. So he's sort of saved from having to make any hard life decisions, And that's not the main arc of the story. The main arc of the story is stuff I don't really care about at the moment, unfortunately. But that little feature kind of stuck out to me because it's a common fantasy. There's this idea that, we were the good guys, we were the good whites, we were on the right side of things. And I sort of think, well, there's a yes and a no there. I think the black nationalists kind of have a point there. If you really believe that the system was a crime against humanity, why weren't you putting your life on the line for it? And I think it's a valid criticism. So I think what the problem is it's not just that old James Self clique who believed that and who had that way of thinking. There's a new generation of leaders who've been coming up who don't even go as far as getting to that fantasy. They just by default believe the sort of racial moral hierarchy that has been imposed upon us since 1994. They just believe it sort of as like an apropos grounding, a priori grounding for everything they believe. And this is people like Leon Schreiber, Dean McPherson, Jordan Hill Lewis, and so on. Their biggest accolades, the things they're most proud of, is liquidating the wealth of their voters at a municipal level to hand to illegal settlers. This is something they boast about regularly. And the recent raising of tariffs in Cape Town to quite an extraordinary degree, this is unpopular, but it's also not unforeseen, right? This is something that's been coming for a while. Some of the others, but it's not just the sort of white savior complex that they get into. It's also the fact that they really, really, really love regulation. And for them, the more you can spend, the more you can tax and spend, the better, always, regardless, right? So one thing they trialed in Hessequa, for example, Hessequa municipality on the South Coast, was dog licenses. So you have municipal officials going around door to door. Where's your dog license? If you don't buy a dog license in the next week, we're going to liquidate your animals. That's kind of, and they're starting to prepare the ground for that in Cape Town by doing a survey of pet ownership in the city. I mean, yeah, the degree to which they like kind of regulating things to the hilt is exemplified in also their electrical policy. So with solar panels, long before they even came up with the wheeling option in public, they started drafting regulations for solar panel owners and installers so that you would be taxed and regulated on your ability to install solar panels to cope with blackouts. This is supposed to be something they should be encouraging, but instead what they did is they made it more difficult and more expensive. Now, the reason for this is that they were preparing the ground for Johann Rupert to have a monopoly contract on wheeling, electrical wheeling within the Western Cape. So he will own and run he owns and runs the instrument that allows people to sell their power back into the grid and purchase it and so on an exchange basis. So he'll take a few points on every transaction. It's very, very lucrative, and he's the only one with the contract. I mean, the DA have also supported him in his attempts to secure the start of a telecoms monopoly at a national level. So, yeah, I noticed someone mentioning the dog license thing. I don't think it's really necessary. I mean, the problem with stray dogs is really just employing dog catchers to deal with strays. You're not going to be imposing dog licenses on people who keep dogs in their houses is not going to deal with the problem of, zoonotic diseases and rabies and, stray dogs attacking people on the side of the road. That's not going to help. What you need is dog catchers. You need people to go into the townships, round up the dogs, and put them down, sterilize them, etc. So this is not a problem that's going to be solved with licensing. This is a marginal money grab, a bit of a power trip. I think noticing that the DA don't seem to have much principles in how they regulate things and what sort of systems they establish is just a very sort of subtle thing, because another example would be in my municipality in Drakenstein, there's something called the waste to energy plant that they're putting up, right? And the idea is that they're going to burn garbage to make power. So more than a decade ago, they started changing the garbage processing, waste disposal regulations much more strict. They banned the export of any garbage, even recycling, out of the municipality. So you cannot actually carry anything out, and they won't build any more landfills, and the landfills are basically full. And then they also made it harder to actually so when you're compacting the garbage in the landfills, you've got to put rubble on top, building rubble. Then they marked tiles as something that they wouldn't accept for free. So now people have to go through their building rubble, and if there's a tile in there, then they pay a fine. It's like that. So basically, they made it impossible. Then fly tipping becomes, ubiquitous, and they spend 14-15 million a year just cleaning up fly tipping in the district. And when they finally get the waste to energy plant contract, the plant is worth about 200 million. The contract, according to the public budget, is 1.2 billion. So they use these extremely flawed and, in my opinion, there's at least a superficial appearance that it might have been crooked environmental impact assessments, which were torn to shreds by a local Buchu farmer who just they did some very, very good maths on the whole thing. But yeah, no, it's really terrible. And then the day they promised they wouldn't do it because a pall of toxic smoke would hang over the valley and not clear during summer, the day they promised the community not to do it, they went to Barbara Creasy in the National Department to get a grant to do it. So the DA don't really care about any of their electorate or their community. They absolutely despise them. And the thing is, this is just their approach to things that don't have any kind of don't have a big ideological component, right? So these are infrastructural projects and so on. Now, what happens when you're dealing with things that are real political competition, right, then you get some interesting things happening. So I want to talk about Oudtshoorn. So Oudtshoorn, they had a big problem because they had an ANC, they had a DA, anti-ANC coalition. I think DA, Vryheidsfront Plus, and I can't remember what else. It was one or two other political parties. And they found that the DA were not willing to work with their own coalition partners. Instead, what they did is they draw up regulations and draft budgets with the ANC, who they were not, strictly speaking, in coalition with. They would talk behind their coalition partners' backs, cut them out of discussions, arrange voting without them, and so on. And this obviously pissed off their coalition partners. So their coalition partners say, look, this is not working. And there was some legal impropriety by the mayor, according to them. And so they had a vote of no confidence, removed the mayor. And then they said, and then the Vryheidsfront said, look, let's try again, a new coalition. Let's put a new mayor up there, and we'll try again. And the DA told them to go screw themselves. So they said, okay, let's open coalition talks to everybody, and anyone who wants to come and form a government here, local government here, can come. We can call it a government of local unity. And they have, what happens, the ANC joins them because the DA didn't even show up to the talks. So what they did is, after this, they responded to this new coalition by threatening the local caucus leader for that part of the Western Cape, said that they're going to kick the Vryheidsfront Plus out of every coalition in the province. Now, what followed were a number of little floor crossings, from the ANC or some other party. Some coalition reshuffles as well, where they swapped out. There was one, I can't remember which municipality, where they swapped out the Vryheidsfront Plus for the Socialist Workers' Party. But there was also a thing where they would get ANC members to resign and join the DA, and then there'd be a by-election, and then they'd get re-elected in their seat. Now, how did they convince more than, say, one of them to do this on schedule for a political strategy purpose? I wonder. So there was a big problem in Swellendam where they tried to bribe the only incorruptible ANC cadre in the entire country to cross over to the DA. The price tag, I think, was 2 million rand, and then there was other things on the side that they'd promised them that indicate that there's corruption of other, both private and public institutions. And the Vryheidsfront Plus, who were in coalition in Swellendam, they were in coalition with one seat for the DA and the rest of the council, and that seat was held by Jean de Villiers. Jean van Schalkwyk. So it's Jean van Schalkwyk. And Jean van Schalkwyk, somewhat of a flamboyant character, but very, very principled, very energetic, And they had problems there before. They had the tradition was the standard practice, I should say, in most municipalities, is that the chair of the Financial Oversight Committee is going to be a member of the opposition. And when Jean de Villiers nominated, as the Speaker's prerogative is, nominated an ANC member to do it, there were howls of derision from the DEA, who insisted that there should be no oversight. They can do it themselves. They can investigate themselves. So this made an enemy out of him, and they made the rest of his time there absolutely miserable. And as a consequence, he didn't feel much compunction about revealing and supporting the claims of the ANC councillor who was allegedly bribed. It later came out of an investigation that it's true, he was bribed. Everything was right, But by this time, the National Coalition had formed, and Peter Groenewald didn't want any waves to be made between national coalition partners. So he squashed the problem by getting rid of Jean de Villiers, and he was kicked out of the party. But then another one of these floor crossings happened in Matsikana, another one happened somewhere else. And then recently, the leaders of the ANC and EFF in Cape Town were welcomed into the mayoral committee, joining the DA under Jordan Hill-Lewis. Very, very stupid move. Now, it's pretty clear that this is a sabotage move. Now, if anyone doesn't think that this could be sabotage, or that the ANC are too incompetent to do it, I tell you, you don't know the ANC. They're incapable of running anything that requires technical expertise, but they are fantastic at instilling party discipline where it matters. And I'll give you an absolutely excellent example. Aside from the way that they blew up Coke, which is an Mbeki-ite spin-off party, which is now languishing in the political wilderness, their biggest sabotage success was the ATM. Now, the ATM is like this very marginal sort of Zuma-ite party, sort of the forerunner to the MK. But they sort of went nowhere. And one of the things that happened to them that almost destroyed them is Jesse Duarte managed to get several thousand ANC members to join the ATM to call an AGM and dissolve the party. Right? And they came within a few hours of having it done. You know, they managed to sort of cancel the AGM, and there were battles over leadership and representation. And basically, it made the party ungovernable, and now they're this marginal little rump organization. So the ANC are capable of stirring shit if they need to, and now they've got an absolute nuclear bomb right in the heart of the DA's sort of main operations. And Jordan should be worried, not just for the sake of, you know, party stability and so on, but for his own personal well-being for one particular reason. And that is that the DA are not actually squeaky clean. They actually can be quite corrupt, like more so than I've just mentioned now. So there's one story that I covered a little while ago with the help of a fellow called Ike Boss. I published this story on the Cape Independent, which is still down. It's an absolutely embarrassing situation. I know, but the story in question was about a character called Malusi Boy, who was the DA's first ANC recruit into office. So in 2011, they won B2 municipality, and that's Plettenberg Bay, and they got this ANC crossover to run, right? And this was the biggest. Hey, Christoph, don't be silly now. Now the big problem here is that he was not a good guy, and he managed to he kept a lot of the old ANC cadres in the civil service there in B2. And over several years, they funneled millions and millions and millions and millions of rands out of both B2 and later the Garden Route district municipality. And there's Hawks investigations into this, all kinds of stuff, right? But every time there was an attempt to hold a disciplinary meeting, Helen Zille would intervene and make sure it didn't happen. Not only her, but other people like Anton Bredel, who appears to have deliberately turned a blind eye. So there's a lot of this going on. So there's 13 years where 14 years where these guys have been allowed to run rampant over there. And I mean, it's not like it's not like the corruption was a secret, right? The party also helped quash domestic abuse scandals that this guy was involved in. And I mean, there's other ones. Like, I'm going to give you a great example of what happened with, Hesekwa. There was a big story that I tried to cover, and there was a detail that I got wrong because an internal document got one of the main factual elements of the corruption story wrong, and I quoted it, and then the company involved came after me, and yeah, I had to go back and find out from the private investigator what really happened. It's a long story, but anyway, there was like 20 million rand stolen from the traffic department and so on. And the municipal manager, a guy called Albert de Klerk, what he did is he fired all of the wardens for blowing the whistle on the story. All of them, just gone. And he directly threatened them, saying, like, if you don't tell me who leaked this story to social media or whatever, you know, some of you are sole breadwinners, you guys are going down, you know. So it was like this, just openly brutal. And when it was brought up that he might be in trouble, he said, I'm untouchable. He said he was untouchable in some form or another. I don't know the exact wording, I wasn't there, but he basically boasted that he was untouchable. Now, the reason for this is he was targeted, he was fingered for a cash for job scandal in Midval some years ago. And the council were going to hold an investigation. And he resigns before the council hearing on that matter could be held, and he gets bounced by the party to Langebach municipality. Langebach? I think it's Langebach. And then the community over there heard about it, decided they didn't want him. They actually protested against his presence, and he was bounced to Hessequart. This happens a lot. If you pick any sort of person at a municipal level, whether they're an elected official or an appointed official, and they're involved in some corruption scandal, you can watch. If you just go through, just put their name in quotes in Google and go through news articles, and you will find a trail of them getting bounced from one place to another. Right? Whether they're NC or DA, right? Whoever appointed them, these guys get, there's an enormous amount of corruption even under the DA's watch, but the DA are much better at hiding it, right? Because they're sticklers for bureaucracy, they're sticklers for paperwork. So they're very good at uncovering their trails, but not always. I mean, Malusi Boy, for example, in the city of Cape Town, he was a human settlements guy. We had Fadil Adams warned us about him taking bribes from the 28s who were getting construction contracts for the city back in 2019. And he reported it to the city, to the police, to the press. No one did anything. And then 4 years later, after he's been whining about trying to get people's attention to this for a long time, 4 years later, the attention is finally paid when the police raid his office. And then everyone just gets shocked Pikachu face and goes like, oh dear, we had no idea. I mean, it's hard to tell people what's real or what isn't with these stories. But where there's smoke, there's fire. If there's money going missing, somebody's making it go missing, you know. And if there's money going up where it shouldn't, somebody's sending it. But this isn't the worst problem. So there's a more deeper systemic problem. So Hillensville is very good at disciplining the party, keeping it in line, making sure that scandals are contained, and making sure that loyal people are picked everywhere. She makes sure that she handles all appointments. She's absolutely manically detail-oriented, very impressible and very intelligent. But that intelligence has limits. So when she took over James South, she started selling this new idea of, and she's got this very sort of Francis Fukuyama end of history, United Nations philosophy, right? You know, every nation should be multicultural, should be a sort of blended humanity that gets gradually stripped of its cultural components until we're interchangeable, fungible commodities that can be shunted about by technocrats, right? And then all nation states should surrender their sovereignty to an unelected international body that they cannot hold to account. So she sees the liberal path to global communism is her sort of philosophy. So you can have any freedoms you like. You know, you can have sex if you like. You can do as many drugs you can like. You can say what you like even. But the levers of power shall remain at the international level. You shall not have representation, and the economic policies belong to the international community. So she's absolutely adamant that you should have all the freedoms you like, as long as they don't matter to the political process. You know, it's just a very elegant way of approaching things. So I don't know if she actually sees this as the liberal path to communism. I'm just characterizing it that way because I'm a bit of a cynic. But the interesting part over here is what happened, why she comes to power in this way, why she gets such absolute control. And it's because Musi Maimane was such a complete flop. Now, the older members of the party, the sort of guys who've been around a little bit longer, like, you know, Tony Leon, they intervened and said, okay, they intervened and they said, look, here's the problem. And there's this fantastic study, and you can find a copy of it on Politics Web, and it's, you know, like how to rescue the DA, and it's by Tony Leon, Ryan Coetzee, and some third person I don't really care to remember. And they said, look, no one in the black community is buying this. We can't break 5% representation amongst black voters, but we are now losing minority voters, and this is bad, and we need to get them back. That's why they put John Steenhuisen in charge. John Steenhuisen is a very fluffy, sort of insubstantial guy, right? He doesn't have any strong beliefs or opinions or convictions. He's just a really nice guy who is white, so people aren't afraid of him. Because, you know, the DA's got these two main prongs over here. They say Swart Gevaar, EFF, and then they go rainbowism, but you're not racist even if you're afraid of the black people. Kind of like that, right? So this is their main model for dealing with minorities and making sure they vote correctly and don't go off the reservation. And so Steenhuisen was necessary. But then Helen Zille has to raise a new sort of cadre of young party members who are going to, you know, replace her when they come by. And she picks Jordan Hill-Lewis, she picks Leon Schreiber, she picks Lindiwe Mazibuko, like all of these kind of people she'd helped get into the party, or she helped get rid of Lindiwe Mazibuko, which became a problem. She also picks Gwen Ngwenya, who's also one of these internationalist technocrats, sort of UN SDG types, right? But Leon Schreiber turns out to be an incredibly dangerous sort of Blairite technocrat. And when I say Blairite, it's very interesting. You can just follow any Fabian society communication and priority to Tony Blair puts out, particularly digital IDs and things like this. And Leon Schreiber will be repeating it. And if you look at his old writings, it's stuff like, well, we should have a policy like Lula da Silva's Brazil because it models itself after Tony Blair and Anthony Giddens' theory of the third way. So it's like the guy's doctrinaire, Tony Blair, all the way 100%. And Jordan Hill-Lewis is like a hard lefty himself. And you know, all of these characters that are floating around, which Helen Zille picked, but here's I'm going to say something that is mostly gut feel. I don't have anything hard and tangible to put on it, but I think that Helen Zille is genuinely a little bit to the right of the people that she picked. I think that she doesn't realize how hostile they are to any kind of reasonable position. You may remember my main focus of the DA for the past few years has been their intention to join a coalition with the ANC, which was decided by Helen Zille, by her own admission, in 2014. She had sold it to the party by 2019, and she'd sold it to the ANC by probably 2020, 2021, right? And sold it to Ramaphosa as an idea. And then this is like, you can see it in this, go back to Biz News 2 years ago with a little triangle speech. You can draw that triangle where it's like, you know, DA on one side, EFF on the other, and ANC is the territory in the middle that we're going to fight for. And we have to keep the EFF out by any means, therefore, you know, unstated conclusion. You know. I mean, what is remarkable is that even a week before the election, she was taking Sunday World to the press ombudsman for suggesting that they might be thinking about a coalition. So there's the dishonesty here is really profound, really conscious, right? But recently they've really lost their marbles because they've defended the Bella Act. There's that leaked bit of video that I passed around a bit a while back, where Lindiwe Mazibuko is announcing her policy. It's not a press conference. I think it was a meeting of her department, like her first some speech to her department. And she was saying it's a great bill because it takes power, it takes away all of the interventions of judges and local communities who don't know what they're doing, and it puts power in the central ministry because we know what we're doing. and she says, oh well, we're gonna make our own sort of smart policies, and then she takes carbon copy the ANC's policies that they had prepared for the bold lined up. And you can see this across wherever you look at the DA in government. The only member who seems to have set their own policy to any degree is Leon Schreiber. Everyone else has taken the ANC's existing policies that they'd written a year before the coalition and is just implementing it. I mean, like John Steenhuisen's pushing agri-BEE, right? He's being extremely, cheerleadery about it. What's her name? Siviwe Gwarube, that's her name. Siviwe Gwarube, she has pushed. She actually, when they have the matriculation sort of speeches, she congratulated the ANC for producing such stellar results. Like, you have done a great job with the educational system. I mean, they've entirely stopped all forms of criticism. They have now decided that there's nothing wrong with the ANC at any level. There are no policies the ANC can conceivably put forward that are wrong in any way. They occasionally release press releases to try and reassure their voters that this is not what they think. But it's always mouthed compromise. Take, for example, the Expropriation Act. What have they been saying the past week? They've no longer say that, willing buyer, willing seller, market value, whatever. Now they're saying just and equitable. What is just and equitable? Well, it's whatever a judge decides. And what are our judges like these days? Well, these are people who don't think there's anything wrong with racial discrimination. They don't think there's anything wrong with expropriation or like compensation in any form. It's very, very worrying that the DA are like this. And I think the problem is they really do hate anyone who's not in their little clique, in their little organization. They really are the most snake-like subhumans in this country. They give the ANC a run for their money in this regard. And in some respects, I'd almost have more respect for the EFF clowns, Because they're there to have fun and cock a snoot at is it cock a snoot or is it cock a snook? I can't remember. At authority and blah blah blah, and they're not entirely a serious party. But you can have a more reasonable conversation with an EFF member than you can have with a DA office bearer. I can tell you for sure. It's and I say that as someone who's to the right of the DA. I don't like them, not because they're too right wing, because they're too left wing, And I like the Vryheid Simplicist platform mostly, but I think they're not as serious and hardcore about it as they should be. There are a lot of people in the party who are there to just take up space and not rock the boat and make sure that they can get access to, career opportunities, which is true of any political party. Those people like that you can't ever completely get rid of them. But the leadership at the moment in the party is split because the Corné Mulder is relying on the cooperation of other rather talented sort of Machiavellians in the party who don't want to do big things. And so he has to constantly balance himself against their intentions. Yeah, it's very difficult. So they won't leave the GNU. I don't think that's going to happen. Which is disappointing, because if they left the GNU and they got rid of, managed to find a way of getting rid of people who were holding the party back, then, they would perform excellently in the upcoming municipal elections, but I don't think they're going to perform very well. Not much worse than they are right now, except in Pretoria, where they've taken a big polling hit. Everywhere else, I think, is going to be at status quo. Same for people who voted for Vryheid Simplicist before will vote for them again. But the DA are the real trouble, because for most minorities, they don't see anyone else to vote for. They really don't. And so the DA sort of feels a bit comfortable in like, you lose a few points, you might gain a few points, who knows? I mean, polls certainly indicate they've got a bump in popularity, but this happens in between every election, so we don't know. I think we are in trouble. I think the next election is going to be problematic, because I don't think anyone can really predict the outcome very well. The bump in support that the DA have gotten might carry over in some places, but I think it's going to be lackluster in the big metros. I know that it usually is, because there's a lot of voter apathy, but I think the voter apathy is going to be on the minority side now. Minorities are going to feel very strongly that, you know, there's not a lot of point, because what the DA has sort of told them, you know, implicitly in the context of everything else they're saying, they're sort of saying, well, everything's going to break down, and you're going to slowly be Zimbabwefied, and we're the best you can do, because we're going to slow it down just enough that it's tolerable until it's all gone. That's kind of what they're implying with the way they're behaving, and this is very, very depressing for a lot of people. What I'm interested in seeing is whether in the next year or so, the Cape Independence movement can pull their act together. Because if they really can, then they're well positioned to say we are the only opposition in the country. It's true, they're the only real opposition. You know, it's MK and EFF are status quo but faster. The only real meaningful opposition is these micro parties, you know, who are really offering something different. And the problem with them is you need them to actually merge. You need the Cape Independence Party and the Referendum Party to merge, because the Referendum Party doesn't have the recognition required, and the Cape Independence Party doesn't have the bureaucratic muscle, so to speak, the organizational muscle on its own. They have to kind of pool resources between the two parties. They really do. The difficulty in this means that some people are going to end up having to take a back seat, or a less involved role, you know, or they're going to have to change their positions. And people don't like doing this. I mean, when you know, especially if you're working on the fringe, you have to invest a lot of your ego and a lot of your time and a lot of your heart into these projects, and it's very hard to let go, because it is an enormous. You put a lot of your soul into it, and so letting go and sort of seeing what can happen for the greater good is a massive challenge. And I see this on, you know, a lot of different people across organizations in the Cape Independence movement. It's a very big problem. People don't want to move fast or break things, but now's the time, you know. But the thing is, you've got the DA hanging over your head again. People are scared of the Western Cape falling to the ANC, but it's too late now. I mean, they've invited the ANC and the EFF into the heart of their organization in the mother city, inviting them to sabotage the running of the city. Because Jordan Hill-Lewis is the biggest, most self-regarding moron I've ever read about outside of an ANC politician. I mean, he got caught recently abusing his powers to intervene in a neighborhood dispute between his mother-in-law and someone who was repairing cars in the neighborhood. Oh no, he's making a noise. Well, let's see if he's got a business license. You know, that kind of thing. And like, sent him an email from his personal email. I'm just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know, this is not what you should be doing with your office. Okay, and the emphasis on upgrading illegal settlements and giving them title deeds and all of this kind of stuff, and the absolute lack of concern they have for illegal land invasions, while targeting people who have right to tenure because they succeeded in an abandoned farm or something like that. Like in Easterley, there's a farm that was owned by a Stellenbosch farmer back in like the 90s. He abandoned in the early 90s. And the colored farm workers stayed on. They farm with pigs. They get on with their business. And there's a sizable community there who are doing farming or not in some cases. And yeah, they're not always the most dignified people in the world, but they actually do have a good, they do have a good cause to be there. And the DA have been trying by hook and crook to remove them so they can build housing for newcomers from the Eastern Cape. And in order to move them out of the way, they had to move other people out of the way in another township. And so you had local officials threatening people in the township, telling them, if you don't move, accept these people into your houses, then you're going to lose your SASSA grants. Like outrageous lies like that, you know, and then offering bribes to people who try to represent the farming community. You know, and now you've got people who've sort of accepted these empty promises of, bribes, going around and intimidating the residents on behalf of the government. So there's a lot of these issues where, like, almost wherever you look, the DA takes the wrong position. Almost wherever you look, it's remarkable. Like in every municipality, you don't even have to scratch that hard. They constantly lie about the shape of every policy they release. They don't serve the people who vote for them first, which is just a basic common sense principle to follow. And I mean, they promise things that are impossible. What are they going to be like when they try and govern the country as a whole? I don't like it at all. I mean, sure, it's going to be like better than the ANC in some respects, but in others, I think they'll become more dangerous. There's a lot of freedom in decadence. There's not much freedom in left-wing despotism. Like, even if it's not all that left-wing, even if it's sort of like Fabian socialism, a synthesis between liberalism and socialism. Even if it's that, you're going to have you're dealing with a state bureaucracy who's just competent enough to go and ruin your life. ANC can barely do that. They're sort of indolent thugs. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what people think they're supposed to be doing. But like, honestly, almost anything's better than this. I think you've got to throw a spanner in the works and move for change. If you're in the Western Cape, you can do that. In the rest of the country, we've got to rely on things like AfriForum and Solidarity, and that's a very long-term plan. Now, I personally believe that the Solidarity is not moving fast enough. There are things that they need to be doing. There's things that a lot of people need to be doing. We need to be breaking up the municipalities in Gauteng, and there's ways of doing that from outside elected government. There's definitely ways you can do that if you're in provincial government, right? But it's very, very hard to do this kind of thing when you've got no political cover for any of the activities that you're going to push. I mean, you've got things like the DA don't like involving the community in anything, so they'll micromanage you to death so that your local community safety organization goes bust. And I mean, they've admitted as much. They've got guys that they've got little bureaucrats that they shunt around from municipality to municipality, making sure that the community is cut out of any decision making or any information chain, even in a crisis situation, because they hate the community. They really do. A big one of these is a character called Ada Barnard, who has made it her life's mission to neuter all private security, all community safety. The only people who should be doing anything is SAPs, and all you can do is stand around on the street and watch. And if you do anything else, she's going to find a way to crack down on you and make your life difficult. And when there was riots in Swellendam 2 years ago, 2 and a bit years ago, she actively went after and had WhatsApp groups shut down so that people couldn't know where the rioting was. So then you got people driving into the middle of, rock throwing contests, and, tire fires, getting ambushed and stuff. No, she was proud of that. She just really seems to despise anyone in the community who isn't, rioting. I think it's just really, really pitiable. They've managed to concentrate all of the most toxic, pathetic, and cowardly traits of humanity into one little bureaucratic machine, which is functioning very, very tightly. I think this country is so screwed because one of the other problems that you have is that everyone has gotten so used to this. They've gotten so used to quality declining and declining, that nobody feels that it is worth it complaining to anybody. Nobody feels it's worth it to try anymore. And you can feel this. You can feel it in yourself. When something bad happens, you can feel. I mean, my mother visited recently, right? She visited us at Christmas. And I remember crossing the road with her, and people just not obeying the traffic rules, not by a huge amount. It's not like they were, going to kill someone with like speeding through stop sign or something. There's stuff like people creeping over a stop sign or ignoring it or whatever. Like little things where people just don't pay attention. They're not bothered. My mother would get absolutely livid. And I didn't even register this stuff. I just expect people to drive inconsiderately. And this has become what we're like, is it doesn't matter how bad things get, because we've had 30 years of constantly lowered expectations. Nobody gets angry when something bad happens anymore. You've now watched the DA become 100% the ANC, more radical than the ANC have been since they came to power. The DA are now more radical than any ANC administration until the present, right? And everyone is like, yeah, but they're better than the ANC. Do you understand how far we've fallen in our expectations? We are letting this happen. We are not holding them to account. We are not saying no. We're not saying, how dare you do this? This is unacceptable. No, we're letting it fly and say, well, what can you do? No, it's unacceptable. Unacceptable behavior. They have a responsibility to seek out interests and to protect them. If they believe in liberal democracy in any form, and I'm not one of those people, but look, if you believe in liberal democracy, then you believe in defending minority rights as an absolute necessity, and they are not doing that. They're not even trying. They are selling us down the river hard. They are endorsing policies they don't have to endorse. And then they say, oh, yes, well, just and equitable is in the Constitution, so, we'll be okay. Don't worry. When your land's confiscated, it will be just and equitable. That's not much of a consolation, I'm afraid, And, I had someone tell me yesterday that Afrikaners would much rather go to America, liquidate all of their cultural identity than stay and do anything productive. And I think actually, if you judge by the polls, how many people want to leave the country? That's true. Afrikaners don't actually care about their identity and heritage as much as they wave it about, because they're not trying. A large majority of them are. There's this tiny minority who are really working their asses off, right? They're working their absolute backsides off to try and defend the Afrikaner heritage and provide a future for them. Yeah, so the guys in Solidarity and AfriForum and Oranje, they're working their asses off every day. But the bulk of Afrikaners are sitting there going, yeah, how do I get into America? They're going to, the Afrikaner identity, as this person put to me, was going to become like Irish identity in America. They might be Afrikaners for one day of the year, and then they'll go back to being ordinary Americans. And that's your future. And as they go, then we've got this awful mess where you have no power block that can check central authority in South Africa. So there's not a lot of time. If Trump gets away with this, if Trump gets away with what he's doing, which he might not. He might stick to landing. He might do something smart. Who knows? If you're serious about global hegemony, you need control of the Cape of Good Hope. To get control of the Cape of Good Hope, you need a favorable government in South Africa, or you need a favorable government in the Western Cape. But in order to do that, you have to partition the country, right? If you want to partition the country, you need a significant number of minorities who can fight for their rights and for a Western-directed cultural perspective, where it's important. So if Donald Trump manages to siphon off a sufficient quantity of white people out of South Africa, he's just nuked his strategic position on the subcontinent. It's like, well, what is he doing? What is the point of this? Is it like, do they think they're going to like cover some sort of skill gap somewhere? No. America churns through sort of about 1 million or 2 million laborers. That's a cycle that they can plow through in a couple of years. And they either, then they'll find they economically need more, else they risk getting unions returning to their workforce. So everyone's just aiming for these temporary patches in a downward spiral. And it sickens me because no one's willing to pay any serious cost for doing anything that'll make a lasting change and establish a community and a future that we can believe in. It's mind-numbing and it's painful to watch. The thing is, even the people who are doing the best work are still, I look at them and I think, well, is this enough? Is this enough? And I don't say that because I can do better. I mean, can I? No, I don't think so. Maybe I can. Maybe I've got some hidden dimension to my soul that I have not yet discovered. But as it stands, I sort of think, well, the best are fighting a very tough battle. Because, and it's not for lack of there being strategies that could work or, vulnerabilities that could be exploited. They're there. These are problems that can be fixed using tools that are in front of us. The problem is a generalized apathy and a trust in the electoral system. Because people think the DA is still going to come and save them, or Donald Trump is going to save them. And that is the main obstacle. If you can remove the idea that foreigners or local politicians are going to fix South Africa, if you can remove that ludicrous fantasy, things will change rapidly. But until that happens, we're going to suffer from an enormous number of people just wanting to be left alone long enough that they can cash out. And only one generation can really cash out. The next generation is screwed. Right? So what do people think they're going to do? I mean, you can say, no, I'm too old to give a shit. Who says? Just, so I'm not saying voting is bad. Do vote, but vote for someone who's going to move the needle to the right. Vote for Action Plus, vote Cape Independence. Vote, find the most right-wing party you can. It doesn't matter. Do something that's going to push the DA out, and force them to change. Because look, I'm aware that it's unrealistic to say that you can vote the DA down to a fraction of its size. No, you're not. Realistically, we're looking at a loss of 10 to 15% maximum under the most hostile conditions that I can imagine being reasonable or possible in the next couple of years, right? But that's enough to force them to change because they pay very close attention to their polling. This is the question. It's about parties like the Fridays for Plus, parties like the Referendum Party and the Cape Independence Party need to be organized. They need to have good media presence. They need to find members who are good at both being on party line and sort of making up their mind. Like Robert King, he speaks with his own voice while respecting the party line of the Referendum Party, and he gets retweeted by huge accounts in America. He gets good attention. He puts out viral tweets every so often. He's very, very good at it, right? And okay, that's online. But in real life, he's also organizing branch meetings and recruiting and so on like that. He's a very effective guy. And people underestimate him because he's a short, posh voice sort of kid. And he's very young. He's like 20, 21, I think. But he's enormously talented. The thing is, there are people who have that talent who pop up in these political parties, but they're not being nurtured and they're not being promoted, right? And having one or two is not enough. You need to, we need a lot of them to actually make this work. And we need private organizations to make a move. We need business to grow a set of balls and realize it doesn't matter how much you can sort of look good in the eyes of ANC politicians. They're not interested in whether you agree with them. Just bribe them and then move on and do something else. Like you're going to have to bribe them whether you suck their dick or not. At least have the dignity of doing one and not the other. I mean, I find this. find this magnificently annoying because I just don't understand. I just don't get it. I just don't understand at all why nobody can make. You don't have to make like a superhuman effort. You don't have to bend over backwards and conquer the world like John Galt. No, you just have to go and say, "Yeah, I'm checking out of this bullshit now. I know the Rainbow Nation is nonsense. I know this country cannot hold together. Whether you blame race or class, I don't care. It is very obvious we're heading for a fiscal cliff. Nobody is prepared to change direction. Okay, and so we have to make sure that some portions of the country can get out." Secession is even more popular in Zululand than it is in the Cape. And people are wary of talking about this. They're very wary. The country can be partitioned and it will be popular. It will be enormously popular. Not with the remnant of South Africa who have to go and do some soul searching. But if you can, but literally, you make 4 cuts in the country and almost everything is fixed. Right? Let's say 5. Let's do like our most ultimate fantasy version of this. Cape goes free, Zululand goes free, Tshwane and Pretoria separate, Soweto and Johannesburg separate, right? And Bloemfontein and those 2 big black cities that sort of streak out to the west and southwest of them separate. Now you've got, in the interior, you've got economic hubs that have stable electoral districts and high human development index. You can maintain the hub of the economy without any kind of political governance instability. This is easy. And then you've got two of the main ports through which South Africa has to export are going to be critical of their political system. So then you have to ask yourself, okay, so what's going to happen if South Africa misbehaves? Well, they're going to face tariffs, which they cannot survive. The entire country will be surrounded. They'll only have 1 port they can only import and export a very small quantity from, and that's the port at Guga. Everything else, Richards Bay and Durban, Saldanha and Cape Town will be gone. And then they'll have to sort of play by the rules. The only thing they'll have left is Walvis. It will be Maputo. Mozambique can learn to play ball too. You do this, and you can get the South African government to behave itself and be reasonable and treat its population take its population seriously and respect them. But if you can't do that, then you're going to watch this black nationalist revolution that's slowly creeping up on us reach its final point, and it all goes away. And the future that you're going to get if you keep voting for the DA is the same future you get if you voted MDC in Zimbabwe. So I'm going to take a couple of questions and then I'm going to go, because this is an act of procrastination, honestly. I just needed to sort of say this stuff. Okay. Lots of remarks from Christoph Smuts. Good to see you around again. McPherson and Steenhuisen are cardboard cutouts of UK Lib Dem circa 2010 onwards. I find that to be an interesting remark. And the reason that I do is quite simply because Ryan Coetzee, who was the advisor that they hired back into the party, he left in 2011. So he rode on Greg Crumbach's tails until 2011. Greg Crumbach was the sort of campaign strategy genius who got the DA up to par. And then Coetzee sort of rode his coattails, put that on his CV, because he was working in those departments as well, and he got selected to do other things in the UK. I'm trying to remember. So he worked as an advisor to the Liberal Democrats, And in the coalition government, when they were facing election, he took the stance that they must boast of the achievements of the Tory party, who they were in coalition with. They lost the biggest loss that they've had in elections in a very, very long time. And then he was in charge of the Remain campaign in the UK. So he got he was in charge of what was called Project Fear. Oh no, everything's going to collapse and go to shit if you vote for Brexit. And he failed at that too. And then he was put in charge of a company called Consulum. And he basically, instead of hiring people as he needed to and expanding contracts, he just worked his staff to death and had such a high staff turnover that eventually they couldn't maintain their contracts anymore, and it had to be, sold off, right? And so just at the time that was being sold off, he gets hired as an advisor to the new coalition government in South Africa. And he's recently, from what I hear, been let go. But he was earning millions for doing this, for giving us this rubbish idea that we need to capitulate to the ANC on everything in order to make sure that we don't sort of get thrown off the horse. Terrible, terrible advisor. Terrible. I mean, look, by all accounts, he's very good at disciplining, getting the budget disciplined and making sure people show up and do their job. But he's not a good strategist. I can't pinpoint exactly where all of the flaws that he's done are because, well, I'm not in his place, but I mean, seriously, the results really speak for themselves. So yeah, as for MG saying maybe maybe the fact that there isn't a better alternative for the DA plays a role. It definitely plays a role. That is what they're doing. What other option do you have? Haha, vote for us. That's what the DA are doing to you. They are laughing at you for having to vote for them. And they howl with outrage if you vote for anyone else. They think, the idea of anyone else running anything is just disgusting to them. Which, okay, fair enough, fine, they're politicians, that's how it works. But they're not serious about doing anything with their role. They just want the role. So could use a youth party. No, you don't want a youth party. You want a party with a balanced, proportional age demographic. Okay. You do need the older hats. As boring as it is to have boomers lecture you about, propriety and all of that, or the good old days, whichever side of the fence they stand on. They do have expertise in organization. They do have technical expertise in managing various systems. So you can't discount them. You do need them for things. And at a certain age, people have more social contacts, and networking is vital. So the idea that it's the youth that will save South Africa is ludicrous. You do need cross-generational experience. There aren't a lot of good choices. No, I still maintain that the Vryheidsfront Plus is one of the best choices available. I'm leaning more to the referendum party, and as much as I love Corné Mulder, and I really like him. As much as I love him, if he cannot kick the party into shape in the next little while, I'm just going to switch over to the referendum party and just campaign for them. And I love Jack Miller as well. I really do, but I need to see that he's serious about trying to get the party merger happening, because for my mind, he's the gatekeeper for that happening. He's the only one who can make that decision. And it's difficult because he's been carrying. I don't like being mean to people that I personally like and whose efforts I respect, but you need that brand, that party, and you need an expanded personnel who can handle an actual campaign at a provincial level, at a local and provincial level, right? And neither of those two parties are good enough on their own. They need each other, and they need to merge. They need to come to some agreement where they can, at the very least, coordinate how they're going to campaign and not directly compete with each other. That's the bare minimum they need to achieve before 2026. So if those two parties, the referendum party and the Cape Independence Party, can get their act together everything is going to be okay. There's actually going to be a serious chance of them putting pressure on the DA to hold a referendum by the next election. It can happen, but then they have to get their act together and they have to demonstrate value at the ballot box in the local elections. There's no other way. They have to do it. We don't have a huge amount of time to sort this out. And there's also the chance, yes, that the DA will partner with the enemy and destroy this province forever. There's a non-zero chance of that, but there literally is only one way. Unfortunately, we have a political solution only. Unless someone genius in Trump's administration says, the Cape must be independent, why haven't you held a referendum? If Donald Trump says that, then it changes things. But that's not going to necessarily happen unless the government does something really egregious, okay? Or somehow they get inspired and decide to wake up and realize that the Cape of Good Hope is actually a vital shipping channel. But their maritime strategy doesn't include this choke point because they looked at the map and said, oh, look, there's all that water. It's not a choke point. They don't realize what the current dynamics are like, the oceanic current dynamics, not the present dynamics. I don't know how the Americans managed to miss details like this because America has some of the most talented people on the planet. Somehow they managed to miss things that are, I don't know, they seem to me to be kind of obvious. You know, I don't know. But, you know, the thing is, because they have all of this intelligence, they always know. If you ever meet someone who's close to government and you bring something up locally, they do know about it, you know? And it's like somehow the pieces never kind of connect. I know they've got a lot going on their plate, but still, I feel very frustrated with this. Anyway, Fred Plus could be a viable Conservative Party figure. PR work done well. They could, yes. And the performance of the GU is being praised across the board. No, it isn't, actually. DA have been attacking Groenewald for his performance. They said that he's responsible for, they've accused him of being responsible for corruption and smuggling in the prison systems, as if it's not this gigantic problem that he inherited. So he inherits this poison chalice, and he could have looked really good for it, but the DA just decided to bash the hell out of him because they see the Vryheidsfront as their only real competition for the monopoly of the minority voting market. They're scared of the Vryheidsfront. If the Vryheidsfront ever became serious and professional, the DA would absolutely, you know, go bananas. They really would. They have more black voters than people realize. Yeah, they have a few. It's not much though, and they are a small party. So we shouldn't get excited about these things. Anything else interesting going on? DA U-turn on their red lines before the election coincided with John returning from Davos. I don't think that's. I don't think so. I think they were always going to be like this. Because, I mean, the signs were there. The way that they absorb former ANC members and overlook their problems and let them continue with looting departments, their lackadaisical attitude to any number of things, you know. I think it's down to they're just so terrified of losing a position in national government. I mean, trying to read something in from the World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum is, you must remember, something that's actually run by the United States, right? Indirectly, for sure. There's no like direct institutional responsibility, right? Not legislated anyway. But it's basically run by the United States, by the CIA. And the whole American establishment has pivoted on all of these issues. So I don't think that makes sense. It's not like they've overnight become based or anything, but there are practical considerations that they understand. And so they think, okay, well, South Africa has to function. They would want the DA to be pushing back hard. But instead, they've increasingly, you see overseas people starting to mention the DA when they're criticizing South Africa. They're mentioning these ministers not as if they're separate, but as if they're part of the problem. So I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. Too many Anglos, you say? I'm not so sure. one of the big guys over there, Willie Alkamp, he is from actually a very right-wing Afrikaner background. They were to the right of the Vryheidsfront, the little party him and his dad were part of, right? And then he married a woman, and they who was sort of ANC leaning, and they joined the ANC. Then they had some personal crises that I won't mention, but you can Google if you want. They're very, very unpleasant personal tragedies that don't reflect badly on him at all. But, you know, clearly it changed direction in his life, and he was in the political wilderness for a couple of years. And then he comes back to the DA. And he's been one of the few people who actually has been defending Afrikaner rights, but as spokesperson of the DA, he's more a party man than he is anything else. And so I don't think, you know, it's not, I don't think it's an Anglo problem exclusively. And you can see with this guy, Peter Creel, that's been going on about things. He's an Afrikaner. I mean, I know a lot of people pick up on the Jewish thing, but I've had a look into it a little bit, and it seems to me what happened with him is that he had like this whole crisis of identity, and he went shopping around for other religions like Buddhism and so on like that, right? And I think what happens is that he's just someone who has been desperately trying to escape white identity and find something that he can rise above with, because he's got a very sort of narcissistic character, which you can see in the way that he, in his sort of emotional affect on his videos as well. The way that he condescends and tells black people, well, actually, you need to learn this and that, and you need to understand, and you need to teach your children this, and all this kind of crap. The guy he has settled on this anti-white thing as an egotistical maneuver, because it gives him the ability to rile people up and get a reaction and sort of rob people of their emotional satisfaction and disturb them. It's a very narcissistic thing to do. But I wouldn't take that too seriously, because people like Peter Creel, right, they're actually kind of good for right-wing ideas, because they are so repulsive and irritating to people who have normal and sensible views. They actually radicalize people. So him being out there, seriously, don't let it heat you up. If you're, just look at it and go, yeah, well, you know, good luck with that. Have fun, you know, because he's going to alienate a lot of people. There are some silly sausages who think that they're going to help the cause, or that people like him are going to help the cause. They really, really don't. So, yeah, they really don't. Cape and his friends party should rebrand to just independent party. No, that's not going to work. It's very difficult to judge. And Zululand is a completely different political landscape. That's not going to work. You can't do this under the same party. Yes, I understand having a partitionist party. You know, it's a great concept, but if you look at it organizationally and the differences between the political cultures in these two regions, it's not going to work. There's also no common national level economic elite who'd bankroll something like this. So you have to be sort of you have to be sort of sensible about this. There are sort of limits. If it happens that such an economic elite emerges, it would look very bad, and it would hurt the Zulu independence initiative, because polling suggests it's quite popular right now. But it can't happen if it looks like a white puppet movement. So they really have to just do it themselves. You know, it's like the same with you know, a lot of the movements in South Africa, really, it's just people need to get up off their asses and do it themselves. Or at the very least, just change their mindset so that they're receptive to it and they don't provide pushback and they don't try and undermine people's hope and sort of interest in alternative ideas. Why not a sort of United Youth Party? Yeah, okay, I read that one. No, I've been over that. I agree with that, because it's my belief that Cape independence can only happen after Zulu independence. The country has to start the breakup in Zulu. Well, my dad, funnily enough, said that to me years ago. He said, you know, you've got to, the eye of Sauron needs to be drawn away. That was the phrase he used. And I thought, you know, I immediately agree. It's obvious. And it might be easier to achieve, even if it's a little bit nastier, because there's a lot of political violence. But it's an idea that actually goes across party boundaries in that part of the country. So in that country, in Zululand, let's talk about it as if it's a country already, because I think in a way it's kind of inevitable. if the MK, I think it comes down to the integrity of the MK. I don't mean like moral integrity, I mean structural integrity. If they come apart, everyone's going to cross over to IFP, and the IFP have to be faced with the question, like, do they really want to go down with the ship? And I think they realize that if they want to preserve the aristocratic elite of the Zulu culture and the Zulu kingdom, they're going to have to free themselves from the Republican tendencies of black nationalism. It's useless. Thank you for that. Yes. I don't want to hear anyone blackpilling. You have to sort of be unemotional about this. It can happen and it should happen, and there's a future in which it can even be seen as inevitable that things work out. However, it does require people shifting their mindset and going, yeah, this is the way forward, right? So if things fall apart, they fall apart. We deal with it then. There's not much we can do if it is going to fall apart. But in the meantime, let's just look at solutions. That's all I'm saying. Okay, look at the solutions. Keep your eye on the solutions. Okay. We know what the problems are. We know what the obstacles are. Keep an eye on the solutions. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, someone says, I don't have children. I won't be around much longer. There's nothing left to give a shit about. Well, I hate to be rude, but that's kind of the reason that a lot of things do go to shit, is that attitude. You're like, yeah, well, so what? Well, okay, cool. Well, so what about you too? The easiest, I would say, is no longer the Western Cape, but rather the western half of the Northern Cape. By Patrick Vianello. I think you're right. But I think actually the whole of the Northern Cape is a possibility in general. And they're also sort of ripe for the picking because they're also a contiguous sort of administrative block. So they can be sort of added on, but the Western Cape's got to go first. It's just how it works. Then you can sort of offer the Northern Cape an option to join. The really hard one is the western part of the Eastern Cape. You wouldn't want to take Port Elizabeth away because that's a problem city, almost ungovernable, and you don't want to be taking that on. But there's a large portion of the Eastern Cape that would be very, very welcome in the Cape. It has cultural continuity, in a lot of different ways. Someone's saying, I don't have children because of the state of the country and I don't want to ever go anywhere. Well, why would you not have children just because things are a bit difficult? People have survived much worse than what we're facing, even in the worst case scenario. I mean, white people in Zimbabwe are actually doing okay right now. They make a living in the black market. They do very, very well doing it. And a lot of them, when I meet white Zimbabweans out there, they're thriving. Right? It's just that it's hidden. They don't flash it about. They do okay. Okay. And what I'm saying is that there's a sort of great filter that you pass through. But the idea that it's all hopeless is nonsense. I mean, look at Kenya now. Most of the startups in that country are owned by British expats. The idea that we can't make it in South Africa is ludicrous. Don't do yourself dirty like that. We can make it. We are good. We have the power to do it ourselves and be okay doing it. The idea that we have to rely on some greater thing out there that's going to rescue us, that is the thing that cripples you. You have to know that you can do little things, even if they're little. You can move the needle a little bit, And I mean, in my little humble way, I know that I have been able to influence some people in some places to move closer to my way of seeing things. Some of them are influential, and that's it. Just because your effect on the world is small doesn't mean that it's not worth having that effect. So just kind of embrace it a little bit, and say, yeah, we can do it, at least hypothetically, there has to be that. Okay. Okay, and then people are arguing, I don't really care. Question meant for last stream. What would the economic outlook for a theoretically independent Western Cape with or without the Northern Cape? It would be fantastic. We have uranium deposits. We have the largest and purest rare earth element deposit in the world in a rocky deposit, not even a sandy deposit, which means like it doesn't damage the machines to extract it. It's just, it's amazing. We've got cool shit here. Okay. We've got a high value, integrated, modernized agricultural economy. We are food secure. We have a high human development index. We have a mature financial sector. We have a burgeoning tech sector. We have 15 to 20% white population, which means we're not going to dominate everything, but we're too big to be pushed around. There's so much going for this kind of thing. I mean, when economists look at that and they say, well, how would the Western Cape do on its own? They give you back figures of like 6 to 7% annual growth for the first decade at least. So the idea that the Western Cape would not do okay is ludicrous. I mean, you could have like a free trade arrangement with South Africa while having a minority preferential immigration policy that doesn't even mention race. You just say, if you're racially discriminated against in South Africa, you're welcome here. And if you're not, sorry, buddy, get in line, and then skills priority, blah, 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 blah. Right? You have a massive you can massively brain drain South Africa in a matter of years. It would be an incredible thing. And then you can soften the impact on the property market by preventing foreigners from owning property. You like things like this, right? And you don't have to take their property away from them necessarily. You can just say no new purchases of property by non-citizens. No expropriation, just sort of take away the pressure. I mean, people go on about Airbnb. That actually doesn't have as much of an impact as people think. I mean, it's not great, but it's not actually the biggest deal. It's actually land invasions and external, because I'm including the rest of society, external property speculation. So property speculators and land invasions, those are your biggest pressures, right? From immigration and so on as well. It's not Airbnb, although I also agree, I don't like foreigners and tourists, and I think the economy shouldn't depend on them. So a couple more questions. I'm gonna quit before it gets midday. If you were the National Party in the mid-80s, what would you have done? The National Party in the mid-80s had already given up on enforcing almost all of the apartheid laws. So you had no more miscegenation laws, no more color bar in the workplace. You had no more by 1985, they stopped enforcing the Group Areas Act. You pick the mid-80s to start riding that horse, you've lost already, son. It's overs, cadovers, right? The negotiations had already begun. I mean, Henry Kissinger told us to end apartheid back in 1976, and that's when we started dismantling the color bar, liberalizing the economy through the logistics sector and so on. The idea that you could reverse what was happening, I think the point at which our future was more or less decided for us, unless we had a crazy totalitarian Stalin-like figure stepping in. The point at which the future was decided for us was in 1922, the end of the Rand Revolt. Yeah, 1922. So don't get sort of excited about people who get excited about apartheid and they think, this is better. No, it's a holding pattern. Apartheid was a holding pattern for a system that was already doomed. So don't kid yourself. I can't replace trades. I don't want to speculate about AI. Typical white liberals telling black people what to think. Yeah, no, there are a few people like that out there. Tracy Brown asking, it will wipe out the middle class, question mark. I don't know what will wipe out the middle class. Lots of things are busy making it hard for the middle class. I don't know what you're referring to. Coney current year. Ha ha! The number one commented on Academic Agent, I believe. on Academic Agents channel. Questions meant for the last stream. What would the economic? Oh, I just read that. Yeah. I didn't notice your name. Then we've got. I'm very tambourine man. I am very sentimental about some places just east of the Sundays River, though. I am terribly sorry. I do like the idea, though, of if you can get a whole bunch of the sort of crunchy old Anglos together to secure the area known as Albany, that little finger strip that runs between the Transkei and Ciskei. Apparently, it's very nice there and not so violent and nice and orderly. And Kenton on Sea is doing really well. So if you know, if the Anglos can do something in the wake of all of this. Sorry about that. Can we Canton? Can we add Kenton on Sea? There we go. There we go. You just mentioned Kenton on Sea. Fucking brilliant. Yes, that's exactly. The DA, but no, I don't think it would be possible, practically speaking. It would be a lovely idea, and I have a lot of sympathy for people down there, but it just wouldn't realistically happen. It's not the way political power works. Robert King, lovely to see you here. The DA have always put the interests of South Africans first. I trust Sulla, Steenhuisen, and Whitty. Yes. Coney, currently, what's with the new Cape Winelands Airport? My goodness, you really are on the button here. Well, that's one of Robert Hassel's projects. I think it's a great idea, provided that they can manage their labor pool well, because there's always the risk with new projects like this that it creates a new informal settlement. But generally, yes, I love the idea of new airports throughout the province. It's good. I think it's great. I've got nothing to say against it. I have big problems with Robert Hassel's political strategy and tactics sort of approach a lot of the time. But I'd say on balance, he is slight net positive. That's the way he's a slight net positive, even though it's like, I mean, look, if you're very attached to a worldview, of course you're going to get irritated with people who are not like on your level. But you know, honestly, someone who lives so removed from ordinary life as he does, for someone in that perspective, he's pretty on the money. I think actually, because most people in his social class are completely mental, and for someone who is where he is, he's actually been really close to reality. I just think that how he understands political parties and power working is bananas. I mean, him supporting Patriotic Alliance or Lucy Maimane or Singeza Zibi or no. He's barking up the wrong tree. I mean, these people are not going to save South Africa. Nothing will. Partition, nothing. I'm sorry. Accelerate the centrifugal force. This is the general principle. And oh yeah, last question. What did Albany divide? Woo, new questions coming into. What did Albany divided into? Why can't it just be that? Hold on. Let me see if I can find what I mean. You're gonna have to excuse me. I'm just gonna get up and get a book quickly. So instance goes is where's the. Come on. Where are you, Harris? Maybe it's yeah. No. I know. Okay, sorry about that. No, I'm not going to be able to find where I put that bloody book unless it's no, that's not it. No, but there's Arthur Keppel-Jones wrote a nice book back in 47, 48. He sort of said, you get like this alternative map of South Africa, how it should be partitioned federally, and sort of giving each little sort of province a different sort of almost canton-like powers to control its immigration. And then that little finger, if you go to a map of the old South Africa and you look at where Transkei and Ciskei were, there's a bit in between it, and that's what he called Albany. Okay, so that's sort of what we're talking about. If anyone's interested. So doesn't the Sierveld/Albany sit within the Western District of the Eastern Cape? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't actually. Sorry. If you take those big chunky properties, like the big chunky traditional areas, you're going to import the same problems that you have in the current South Africa. The black population, if they get to be a majority, they're going to be the same problem that they were before, in that there is a direct disconnect between the kind of policies that they are interested in and the kind of policies we are interested in, for a number of historical reasons. And reforming a whole population takes real political muscle and very complex interventions that are very unpopular and very difficult to sell internationally. And they also take a long time. And so it just isn't realistic to try and go down this road. Nation building is hard and unpopular and unpleasant. But I mean, that's so far away. What's going on? Aren't black people already over 50% in Cape Town? Okay, in the city, it's about half. Yeah, it's getting up to half. Yeah, it's not a hell of a lot of time, but I mean, they're not a permanent feature. A lot of them are in informal settlements. I'd say, because it's about sort of 10% of the population of a province are in informal settlements, and that means that about 20% of the black population. So a large amount of that can be cut down by evicting people for illegal land occupation. So it's a complicated thing. But I mean, look, the thing is, I don't even want to get rid of the vast majority of black people. It's about it's a purely pragmatic sort of Singaporean approach. So it's about, can you balance the forces between the ethnicities so that no one can dominate one another, and so that there can be a degree of coexistence in the long term. It's because this is the trouble, really. So if you cannot achieve the sort of balance that allows political stability, then you're going to struggle. Okay. Yeah, you have to make sacrifices. And the other thing too is, let's say you break off the Western Cape and Zululand, and you take the biggest ports in the Eastern Cape too. What do you leave South Africa with to function even on a basic level? Not much. You have to give them something to be getting on with. So I don't, the Tamarind Man has a point. They don't really vote though. But this is what I'm saying. When you have a new political system, people change their perspectives, and having a huge passive voting bank that is not being tapped into is actually a ticking time bomb for political stability, because eventually they will want to participate in the political system, and you don't know which way they will cut. So they are a wild card element in the political system. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, look, the thing is that South Africa can work, more or less, but it relies on there being a degree of administrative devolution that allows economic hubs to maintain local governments, stable local governments that can function in the face of collapse around them. So most of the Free State can be governed like dirt, but if Bloemfontein is has a stable minoritarian government, then your economic hub will function, and that allows you to keep the economy humming, right? Against all other problems. So, and the same counts for Pretoria and Johannesburg and Midvaal and places like that. Is if you can get them up and running and functioning, then it's good. I'm going to end this, Michael. I have other things to do, but thanks.